Hello and welcome to another edition of Movie of the Week. And today we are talking about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This is now the second movie in this rejuvenated Ghostbusters franchise after that, ill-fated reboot didn't quite work out. And of course, it's also the second movie featuring Paul Rudd and, Finn Wolfhard, all of those other cast members now. The previous one, Ghostbusters Afterlife, came out when we were still sort of in, pandemic recovery mode. But here, we are in 2024. We are pretty much past that point, and we're getting a movie that I guess at least the critics aren't responding all that well to so far, if you go by the Rotten Tomatoes score. But the audiences are still going to the theaters and checking it out. So as part of that wave of Ghostbusters fervor, we had Angelina go and watch the movie.
Hi
So Angelina,
guys.
how are you doing today?
Good. Sorry, I realized my camera was super off. No, I'm doing really well today. Thank you guys. It's going. It's almost summer. I'm so excited for the hints of summer and spring that are finally peaking today. So
Yeah, I mean, it's finally the weather is starting to get warmer. It's even on days when it's colder. I've like the sun is like you can feel the warmth more, which is great. But as far as Ghostbusters go, I mean, Frozen Empire, they certainly weren't feeling the warmth for certainly parts of the movie. It seems like so. You went and saw the film. If you guys have been following our socials, you probably saw Angelina do a quick review out of the theater, and
we love a
let's
good
just
solid out of theater review.
yeah, let's just say like you weren't ecstatic about it. So could you just expand on your thoughts about this movie? What did you think? I mean, also give us some insight. If somebody hasn't gone to see the movie, what is the movie really about? I know we're gonna get into spoilers, so the spoiler alert, guys. But yeah, like what did you think about the movie?
Yeah, so I went to go see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I actually didn't see the last one, so I was kind of picking up on the story as it went, and I was literally like in the theater, like sort of reading through like the storyline of what happened in the last movie so I could like piece everything together. And the movie is too long for what it is. I think it's just under 2 hours, but it just felt too long. Like 30 minutes of that was just like, when some editors cut it a little too close and then some editors just leave too much space in between scenes. It's like you didn't need that moment there. Just cut it. I feel like there was a solid 20 minutes, like 20 to 30 minutes that could have been cut out of this movie and I would have been okay with that. Or if they would have cut some of the lead up out and then actually like showed us more during the fight, like it really felt so predictable. It is just a cut and paste sort of Ghostbusters story. It is giving the first Ghostbusters movie from the 80s. You're not really worried or scared. You're like, ooh, scary. Like, no, it just is not. This movie wasn't giving, if that makes sense. And I think McKenna Grace is great. I think she's wonderful. She just kind of is lackluster in this movie. She's giving some teen angst, but she totally could have played into that way more. I just, Paul Rudd is great, but so many of his jokes just fall so flat. Like, this movie is like a subpar sort of B movie. And I feel like that's what the ratings are giving. I think that's what box office is giving. This scene was actually funny. There's like this fat little green blob that is a ghost that is like in the attic. But I wish they would have like played more into that and given him a moment because he actually is the one that like helps save the day. Spoiler alert. He like so there's a ghost that can literally possess anything. They call him the possessor, and he possesses this pizza that then gets eaten by this blob, which is like a funny moment of humor that I wish they would have just given more time. I don't know. It just feels like this movie was so predictable, so kind of off pace. But I kind of felt that around the original Ghostbusters too, right? You look back at the original Ghostbusters and you're like, that's cheesy because it was made in the 80s. But this movie was made in 2024 and it was still giving that same level of like, okay, I could watch this at home. Like, this is the kind of movie that, quite frankly, like, I feel like everyone should just take an edible and watch from home really high with all their friends. Like, that's like
Mm,
the way that this is
yeah,
fun
well,
or giving. It's just like one of
yeah.
those. Obviously, I understand that weed is not readily available to everyone and nobody under the age. Okay, but you guys get what I'm saying. It's one of those movies that it's like you just got to give it what it is. Who are you going to call, Dan? Who are you going to call?
I mean, I'm probably just based on your review, I'm gonna call Uncle Joey because, he can cut it out. And that seems to be what a lot of this movie needs,
Uh-huh.
it seems like. But, yeah, as far as, like, I mean, I was looking at the reviews, I've watched the trailers. I haven't had the chance to really check it out myself, but even the, people who I know that went to see it, they're like, "Yeah, it's not all that." Like, I was talking to John earlier on DC Daily, and he was like, "Yeah, it's not a really good movie." And
It's
it seems like some of the like the throwback stuff, the cheesiness might be just because like Jason Reitman along with Gil Cannon wrote the movie. Gil Cannon also directed it. Jason
yeah.
Reitman is producing it. Jason Reitman directed Ghostbusters Afterlife, which had better critics reception. But between the two of them, it seems like they went for the nostalgia angle, which I thought that Ghostbusters Afterlife, they put a pretty solid bow on the whole situation with, you know, bringing back the original cast and kind of really giving you a nice send off, and then really just moving forward with a story and a young cast of characters where you can kind of grow and expand. And then it seems like with this movie, they've just kind of gone back and you get all the and not that I don't
You get
appreciate
the
seeing Bill
whole
Murray and the
original
crew,
cast back to
right?
help fight.
Not that I don't appreciate it, but I
Yeah.
feel like it sort of holds the franchise. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to sound like, "Oh, this is," because this has some parallels to, like, Star Wars, because, like, if when I looked at some of the reviews, they're like, "This is basically like the first Ghostbusters movie, copy and paste it over."
Yeah.
And so you could say, "Oh, yeah, this is like the Force Awakens of Ghostbusters." But I'm not somebody who doesn't appreciate celebrating something that's classic. But what I do want to say is, given that we had Afterlife, and in Ghostbusters Afterlife, you had a story that really paid homage to the past while moving you into the future, why not continue in that direction and then sort of like chart a new course? Like, you sort of, these characters that you would have, Finn Wolfhard and co, like, they got that blessing in the previous film. So then why bring back all these characters again? Maybe it's just more. I mean, you know what? One of the reasons probably why, because Sony has set up like Ghost Corps. They did this back in 2015 before they made that reboot, and then that same production company is behind like all of these, the Afterlife and Frozen Empire, and it's sort of like PlayStation Studios. It's like a production company within Sony
But it
Pictures
it doesn't
and
make
Columbia.
sense to me
But
why, like, what is the
but no, no,
financial.
but think about this though, like, because Jason Reitman and Dan Aykroyd
Yeah.
are like two of the people who head that company. So there's a lot of like legacy, people who have a lot of stake in the franchise who are still calling the shots. And sometimes that could be a good thing, and sometimes it cannot be. And I think in this case, what we're finding out is they're sort of holding on to the past glories a little too much, and that's coming to affect the movie in a negative way. Like, would you
Yeah.
agree? Like, is that, do you think that this movie would have done better if they decided to really just kind of go in a new direction, like almost like Kylo Ren, like in The Last Jedi, like kill the past, or like you have to move, kill the past, kill it if you have to, or something like that. He's like, just let's just move on. We've killed uh
Wholeheartedly. Yeah,
Han
I mean,
Solo,
I
and
think you
just
have to do it. Yeah, I have no idea where you were going with that one, Dan. We
yeah.
we
No, no,
watch
no, it's
Star
like
Wars,
kill,
but we're not
it's
like
like destroy.
Star Wars.
Dude, I'm saying, like, this has similarities. It feels like this is
Yeah,
one of those things where it's
I
redoing a classic movie, but
I
mm,
think and it's so hard too. And actually, I went with a friend because she was like, "Oh my god, I love Ghostbusters movies. Like, they're my favorite." And I brought her, and I was like, "What did you really think about the movie?" And she was like, "It felt like a remake of all the other movies. It was so predictable and so sad." And I
like
was like, "Oh no." But that's kind of how I feel with so many of these franchises, that it's like they're holding on so tightly to try to like milk out the last bits of money, whereas if they would have just invested this money into a new idea, or just like full send, like just creating a new storyline, like why did they go from Oklahoma or wherever they were before in the last movie to go back to New York, to go back to the firehouse, to retell the same story of New York City? You know what I mean? It's like, what, what
Right.
you couldn't just continue the franchise like in that segment, because at least that's something new, right? Like I understand that when the world ends, you have to be in one of the big cities because that makes it more like high stakes. But it's like, okay, also these things are
Yeah.
cute, but that shit
Right.
was dark. You literally see them, I kid you not, you see them sawing off their arms, you see them frying themselves
Oh
on this
my
like car.
God.
It's like literally they're like committing suicide, getting run over. They run over each other and then they just pop back to life. It was the freakiest thing I have ever seen. And that was absolutely the highlight of this movie. And then at the end of the movie, they steal this truck. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. They stole the show. They were
Mhm.
the highlight, period. Period with a T. So funny. But the rest of the movie is kind of like, yeah, okay. And the way they set it up is like all the ghosts escaped from the thing, like from the containment unit. And so the next movie is them going to be collecting all these ghosts that they've put in there over the past 20 years back into the containment unit and building a new containment unit. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like we already know what's gonna happen on the next one. It's also so sad to me when you can start a movie and then you immediately know exactly what's gonna happen at the end of this movie and at the end of the third, at the end of the prequel that hasn't even been started in production yet. Like that's a problem. And it's just so see-through. It's so shallow. It it's a Ghostbusters movie. I don't know. Like they just needed to move on, and instead they just told the same story over and over again.
Yeah, and it just seems like that's something that also is affecting the box office. Like I was looking at the numbers. So before this movie came out, I had pulled up this article from this is now from March 19th on Deadline, where they were like, Ghostbusters franchise is gonna go past $1 billion, which obviously it was basically at 900 some odd million. So it was gonna make some money. And this is
Mhm.
cumulatively, not like just
From
this
all
movie.
of them.
Nobody, yes, all of them combined. So it's gonna be $1 billion franchise, as I like to say.
Yeah, but
Now,
how much of that was put into the movies?
well, so so the gross for Ghostbusters, the 2016 Ghostbusters that Paul Feig directed, was 229 million. That's how much it made on a budget of 144. Then in 2021, Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, who of course started the franchise, directed Ghostbusters Afterlife, and that had a budget of 75 million,
Mm.
and then made 204 million on that budget. Now, this Gil Kenan directed Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, which Jason Reitman is producing and co-wrote. So the Reitman family is still very much a part of the picture. It's made for 100 million, and if you look at the box office numbers, is debuting to 45 million domestically, and then internationally, I was looking at the numbers. It's starting out with like 16 million, which means all around it has already made over 60 million. So
Mhm.
it's on a path to make some money.
Yeah.
However, that's not the part that really stuck out to me. What stuck out to me was the fact that this movie is making around the same amount of money as what the previous movie did. And the previous movie came out, Ghostbusters Afterlife did, in 2021. Now that, if you remember, 2021 was we were still in the middle of the
Oh yeah.
pandemic, right?
Nobody was
So
going to the movie theater.
and that movie made 44 million at the box office on its opening
Yeah.
weekend. This one only made 45.2 in 2024, 3 years later.
It's not
At a
COVID anymore, everybody.
so I mean, I just think like what it tells you, like as this article says, it's a
Yeah.
sign that the 30-year-old franchise has not expanded its constituency beyond the original and now aging core fans of the business of busting ghosts. Now, this is where I was making a comparison with Star. I mean, maybe a Star Trek comparison is more accurate. That there's literally the fan base is dying off, quite literally. Like and if you're not going to expand and gain that younger audience, then you're not going to be able to make money. I mean,
The way you
if you
said
really
it,
look at
it
it,
made it sound
I'm
literal. Like they're literally all dying because
well, right. No, I mean,
oh
no joke. No, I mean, like, well, how else do you explain it, right? Like, is that's what's happening here. It's like
no.
they're literally dying off.
So
Um, so yeah, I
well,
mean,
with that being said, yeah, no,
yeah.
I agree with you. I remember watching this movie. I remember watching the original Ghostbusters when I was really young because my dad was rewatching them, right? And my dad is 53 now. My dad is pretty young. And I don't even think he's going to see these new movies. I think a certain part of the nostalgia is lost when you keep using the same tricks to motivate the nostalgia. You're using the same taglines, right? Because those are the famous taglines. Then you're using the tactics of like reuniting the whole original cast to fight the ghost. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. But you know what I mean? You already did that sort of like surprise, here's Bill Murray, surprise, here's the original Ghostbusters game in the last one. It doesn't give the same effect. What, three years later when you're doing the same exact thing? And I would have been happy to see Bill Murray throughout the whole movie. I love him. He's funny. He was only really on screen for a couple minutes, but he was really, to me, the star of the original Ghostbusters. I don't know. Maybe people can disagree with that, agree to disagree. But Bill Murray came on screen and I was like, yeah, he's the funniest one. He like makes like a funny, he doesn't even have a line. He like cracks open the old like electrical box and he's got liquor hiding in the cabinet. And all he does is laugh, open it up, and like has one line. And it gave me more joy
Well,
than the majority
yeah,
of the movie did. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
that's fair.
I just,
That's
maybe
fair.
they didn't want to pay him enough money to be on the movie. Maybe he didn't want to be a part of it to that extent. But to me, it's like, why are we using, like, either have them in the whole movie or don't have them in the movie? You know what I mean?
Right.
Having them
Yeah,
for one scene
it's
to do
it's but
like
that's
it
the thing.
doesn't make sense.
Like even in the previous movie, they had him come in only for small bits. I mean, the budget. That's the thing about these movies. Even the original series of films, Ivan Reitman was known for making movies on smaller budgets, relatively small. You know, like they weren't making these $100 million movies. These movies are now at that level. They're that Hollywood franchise tentpole level. But the Ghostbusters franchise has always thrived on the idea of you don't make a super expensive movie and then you get a big return for it. That was the business model that made Ivan Reitman a successful director producer. And I think Sony has tried to take a similar approach, but obviously some numbers are inflated. Bill Murray had a small role in the last movie. He also kind of went through a period where, I mean, he wasn't necessarily making the best of headlines for a while, so maybe
Mhm.
that has something to do with it. But at the end of the day, I think what happens when you do something like this is you kind of end up like neither here nor there, and it seems
Yeah.
like that's what this movie ends up with. It's neither a complete departure from the past and moving into a new future that's established in afterlife, but it's also not quite exactly what you had back in the 80s because
Mhm.
obviously time has passed. And so while the audience is just giving it an 84%, critics are completely slamming it at 43%. And a number that's even more telling, or two numbers that are more telling, is Ghostbusters Afterlife had a 64% critic score and even more importantly, a 94% audience score. So even though the audiences are positively responding to this movie, they're not responding nearly as well as they did to the previous one. And then when you get into some of the reviews,
They're
when
not
people are
good.
hating on it, like they're really hating on it. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. So I mean, look, we don't like to be negative about movies. Like, if we want to go into every movie and love it, like, and I think Angelina, you are usually even more positive than I am. But
Yeah, I
it
really
just,
try to go into these movies and find something great about it, and this
yeah,
movie was like, I literally would have preferred to go to bed earlier and not see it. Like, I really would have preferred to just get more sleep last night. So,
yeah,
that's how I feel about that one. But I've also never made a comment like the comment I made. Like, I feel like the only way I could find this movie, like, really funny is if I was, like, smoking weed. Like, it was not that. And I don't do that. That's like what I have to impair. Like I don't go into movies and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go get high to watch this movie. Never in my life. No. I feel like this is one of those movies that in order to find it funny, like you gotta like take an edible to go watch it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
also
it's
like
like
okay,
I
so
cannot comment. I think that's illegal. I don't know.
no, I mean like I think Godzilla X Kong is gonna be one of those movies too, probably. Where
I'm a
it's
little bit
gotten to
more
a
excited about that one. Yeah.
it's so ridiculous. I think like when they went to was it King of the Monsters, I think it was. That's when the franchise completely went off like they jumped the shark.
So I
Like
haven't seen any of them. So I watched the
yes.
trailer for this movie that we're reviewing next week, and I literally told Dan,
Yeah.
I was like, "So which of these do I have to go see in order to understand this one? Because I haven't seen."
I yeah. Yep. I mean, for those who might be listening to this, yeah, Angelina says she hasn't seen any of the Godzilla movies. Well, not well. Did you see Godzilla minus one, like the one that won the best VFX Oscar this year?
No,
Oh, well, I mean that's not connected, but to
no,
this
none of
franchise, but
them. I haven't seen a single. I watched the King Kong with Naomi Watts years ago. Yeah, that one.
wow,
That
yeah,
was all.
that was years ago. That
That
was
was
years
like
ago.
that was the last one.
Um,
I
but
don't
yeah,
even know
so
when
okay,
that movie came out. It was like 15, 16 years ago.
I think so. Let
And
me.
maybe more. I don't know. I think I was like 10 or 11 when that movie came out. That's the last King Kong that I saw, you guys. So it's going to be a fun
That
time.
was I wanna say it was early it was around the time Batman Begins came out, so it was probably that. Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm going to have to pull
different
sort of. Remember when I had to watch
yeah,
John Wick 1 through 3 in order to go see
1
John
to
Wick
3,
4?
right.
It's going
I
to be one
mean,
of those.
yes. I like, even when I have seen all the John Wick movies, and I had seen them, but I did it like a whole marathon in the week leading up to, and it just kinda puts you in the vibe. I think if you wanna enjoy these movies, it's just a good exercise to kinda get yourself in the mood for John Wick movies or like, Godzilla movies. But just to kind of put a quick period on this review, the daily numbers at the box office are decent. Like this movie is currently we're doing this on a Tuesday. It's
They
sitting at the
definitely
top
had
for the
more people
day.
go see it on Sunday than expected.
Yeah.
Based off of because they actually reissued the estimation for the weekend.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. It made more. I think they were thinking it was gonna top out at 42, and then it ended at 45. So yeah, I mean there is a demand, but the thing is that was still just the opening weekend. This movie
mhm.
is gonna go into a second week, and then all of a sudden this big monster of a movie, literally Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire comes out. So is it gonna be a buzzsaw for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? Usually when a movie is not very well received, I mean, I know the audience score is decent,
You
but the
think
fact
they
that
kind
the
of have the same overlap? I feel like they're gonna have the same overlap of audience, no?
they will. I think a lot of the target audiences is kind of the same. At least a target audience. I'm not saying that it seems like Ghostbusters missed a lot of its target audience because the people who are showing up, it seems like are the older demographic, the fans of the
Yeah.
franchise from years ago. I'm not saying everybody going to that movie is like 60 years old,
The first
but
Godzilla
it's
and the first King Kong
yes.
came out when? Like in the 70s?
Well, right, but like the current iteration of these stories
Yeah.
have been going on for like the last 10 or so years.
Yeah.
And this movie also, even though Godzilla minus one is not part of this franchise, it has the benefit of having that movie come out recently and then win the VFX
I
award at the Oscars.
I'm not
So
sure that
you're gonna have a
everyone's
lot of
gonna know
positive
that they're
vibes
not
around it.
related.
Well, but they don't have to. Like you can go into this.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
It's
Here's a
gonna
secret.
benefit from the name, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely, but Angelina, since you haven't seen the other movies, I'm gonna tell you a secret. If you do not watch any of the other movies before, you can turn your brain off all the same and enjoy this just as much. That's basically what these
Eyes
movies are.
glazed over, like
It's literally these are like these Godzilla Kong movies are like the current like era's Transformers movies where you don't need to know what's going on. It's just good shit happening on screen, and even though it's not mayhem, there's still a lot of mayhem on screen that you can enjoy. So,
you and the big
uh, yes, and they've some of the cast from the previous movies coming back. Then you're adding some new cast members in there.
Yeah,
what's this guy's name? This guy was in Legion. Why am I forgetting his name right now?
I
Dan
have no idea
Stevens.
who that is.
Dan
Can't
Stevens is
focus.
great in anything. And look at that. He's got a freaking metallic arm
It's
brace, and
giving
Godzilla
like
can glow purple now.
Transformers a little
It's
bit.
literally, this is like the poster of the second Transformers movie,
Yeah,
right? Where they
right?
go fight
I
in
was like,
Egypt.
it's
Like
giving
it's
Transformers.
exactly. It's and I saw the trailer, and the trailer, like they're running next to each other, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden Kong grabs one of the Godzilla spikes and like hops on the side. I'm like, okay, I'm in. That's it. That's it. You
Yeah,
don't need
I
to
mean,
show
it
me
just looks
anything
like
else.
fun, right? It just looks like
Yeah,
monster fun.
right.
Oh, we're
And
here
I think
for it. We're gonna
yes,
have a great time.
yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, that's gonna be the next movie that we review. Hopefully, Angelina, your out of theater review is gonna be a little more
A little more
positive.
enthused? Yeah.
Enthused?
I
Enthused is
literally
a
was
good
like, how do
way to
I not
describe it.
make this out of theater review negative? Who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters. Wah,
It's
wah,
like, what else
wah.
is
Like
there to
it's
say? I don't know.
well, maybe who you're gonna call should be Godzilla and Kong because that's what's coming down the road.
Who are
So
you gonna call? Anyone else. Anyone.
anyone
Just
else,
literally
anyone else.
anyone.
It's look, it's unfortunate that Ghostbusters isn't this movie isn't as good as it should be or as people would expect it to be. But hopefully, I mean, Sony seems to have big plans for this franchise, so maybe they'll take a kicking and then they'll lick their wounds and come back stronger than ever. Who knows? I mean, this movie just needs to get to like 200 odd million, and it would have done as good,
And
if
then
not
they're
better,
gonna
than
make
the
a
previous
third.
one.
They're gonna make a third no matter what.
So
You know what
yeah,
I'm
but
saying?
like the one thing they cannot do is the previous movie had a budget of 75. This had a budget of 100, and if
Yeah,
they're only making around 200 odd million, you cannot keep spending more money on these. You got to go the other direction. You
yeah.
got to kind of go to a back to the basics. And like I think when you're bringing in somebody like Bill Murray and all those like old actors, that's where a lot of those money goes. They're getting paid a lot of money to do very little
Well,
work,
especially Paul
and
Rudd. I'm sure his ticket is expensive for
he
movies.
is, yes,
Yeah, I was
absolutely,
like, I mean, we love
and
Paul Rudd.
we
This was
do.
not his shining moment. It's like,
Right,
no,
and
no.
I don't think you need it. I think if there is one solution I can pitch is that this needs to like the next Ghostbusters movie needs to feel like the Goonies or like something to that effect,
Yeah,
where you just have like the younger Ghostbusters out there doing their thing, and that's it. Like let's get the adults out of the room for that movie, and then you can tell a good story, and then you change maybe the expectation as well in terms of what people expect to see in that film, and you go in a different direction. You go with a smaller budget, so that way you don't have as much of a
yeah,
pressure to go make a lot of money from it, and Sony will be happier for it too. I'm sure as a studio that they don't like losing money, but we're looking forward to Godzilla times Kong, the New Empire. That movie looks amazing. I love this poster, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. This is going to be probably the one movie because I haven't had the chance to see a movie in the last couple of weeks, and I
yeah.
I,
Let's
I
do
want to go
it.
see the American Society of Magical Negroes too. That's you had a pretty good review of that, which is on
Yeah,
the channel, so guys go watch that too. And we'll be back here in a few days' time talking about Godzilla times Kong, the New Empire. Until then, go out there, watch a movie. There's tons of them out there. If you haven't seen Dune Part 2, that's still out there. I saw that recently. Very good film.
yeah.
Um, it left me a little, like, it was a little soulless, but it's visually spectacular.
So
Um, yeah, it's a little soulless. It didn't really affect me that much emotionally, but I can appreciate
the visual effect. For
wizardry
sure.
on screen.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, go out there, watch a movie, come back and talk to us about it. Hit the like and subscribe. That helps us out. That gets you guys notifications when we go live or have a new video go up, which we these days are doing quite often. So until the next movie review, until Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, we'll see you back here on Movie of the Week. Angelina, thank you. It's always been a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
As always, we'll see you here on the next one.
Bye, guys.